All right, well, welcome back to another Supply Chain Insights video. I'm here today with D-Mac and Mark Eberly, and we're going to be going over a couple different items today. But the major topics we're going to cover are going to be inventory management, pipeline management, and really how to build a sales forecast. So when it comes to the most rudimentary part of a sales forecast, where do you guys start? Like, especially for entrepreneurs and for smaller companies, where would you begin if you don't know where to start?
Okay, well, I like to start with the customers. So who's the customer? Who are we talking to? How is our relationship? I want to understand what their problems and pains are relative to both forecast and to their world. So what do I need to provide and how much of it do I need to provide? But if I don't have a good relationship, I want to build that relationship, because inside of any good forecast is an understanding not just of how much crap do they need, but how do they make a decision? Do they have money to make that decision? Do they have urgency around making that decision? Because some people will smoke up your butt and say, oh no, I need this on Tuesday. And they're full of crap. And so really understanding and building that relationship so that you can move into a role of somebody they can trust and somebody that can advise them on what's happening. And then after the customer, that's, I don't know, that's where I start. Where do you start looking?
Well, I think that's a great, as far as the customer is concerned, right? The other side of forecasting is going to be the sales team.
Yeah.
Right? Whoever you've got running it.
I don't trust them.
Yeah, which is a whole battle in itself.
Yeah.
But I think for any company, especially a manufacturing company, there's a lot of things that are tied to how you're going to forecast. And I think the first part is, okay, well, what kind of inventory management do we have, right? Are we using just in time? Are we using FIFO, LIFO, consignment strategy, ABC? There's a whole, slate of things that people use. And then if you don't understand first what you're going to be using or what you might even be transitioning to, because that may change, especially in our dynamic environment we're in right now, the forecasting piece becomes really complicated.
Yeah.
So I think that's step one, is having a deep understanding of what that strategy is going to look like from an inventory management standpoint.
Right, so you can take the amount of inventory you have, who you're selling it to, that customer relationship, and then you could start to build a forecast. When it comes to your customer, it sounds like nailing down the target market and understanding how you're going to get that inventory to them is a major part of building that sales forecast.
You've got the distribution side of it, but you also have the ecosystem that you're selling in, right? Chip manufacturing was really painful during COVID and in that period of time. And I remember when I was with a hardware company, we had 90-day lead times on servers, 60-day lead time on desktops, and 45, 50 days on laptops. And it didn't matter what your forecast said, you're not going to get anything for 90 days. And so creating urgency with the customer that says, okay, it's partly educating the customer, because they don't care about chip problems. They want their desktop, right? They want their server. They don't care about chips. And so you have to educate them on, we need to get your order in now so that we can start purchasing for what you're going to need in the next 180, 190 days. So it's also being educational in understanding the environment and the ecosystem inside of which you're getting your inventory and your supplies. So if you don't know where your crap's coming from, then you can't be a good conversation or advisor to your clients or customers. I mean, you talked about building a forecast with your sales team. So how do you connect those three things, right? You got the customer, you got your sales team, and then you've got the ecosystem inside of the universe that is, where do I find my crap?
Yeah, well, and I think it's always been the most challenging part, right? When you have a sales team and trying to forecast, there's multiple pieces to this, and I think there's been a lot of misfires for a lot of small companies in the beginning, because they don't understand that education is a big piece of this. Even the inventory management piece, right? I think it's important for your salesperson or people to understand what that is, right? And an explanation of that, because they're the people that are getting in front of people and building a reputation. And, if they're not saying the right things, that becomes a lot more complicated. On top of the fact that, you're asking them to forecast, and salespeople are, right? You have two components to a forecast, right? You have, I want you to build a pipeline, right? And I want you to close business.
Yes.
Right? And the salesperson is always saddled with the quota, right? It's that nasty, uncomfortable thing, but it's something that has to be there. But if you don't put the right pieces in place as a company, right, then you don't get those results. If you don't have, from a pipeline standpoint, if you don't have the right stages put in place and helping them understand the stages of the pipeline, then you don't get accurate stuff, because the salesperson, if you said, listen, you have to build $2 million worth of pipeline, right? Okay, can any salesperson do that? Yeah, I can make up all kinds of stuff.
I can put anything in the CRM.
Correct, right? So
$2 million.
yeah, so have the stages in place. That's a done deal.
Mark committed.
Right? Yeah. So have those in place, right? But make sure that they understand what each piece of that is and how it's defined, and then measure against it. And also, I think one thing that's missed a lot is a lot of companies don't bonus against pipeline build and properly putting things in stages, right? They'll bonus based off of commission, what you close. But if you don't have an accurate pipeline, then to this whole entire point, how are you going to forecast as a company?
Yeah, right. I see what you're saying. That's a really good point.
Well, you're sorry.
No, totally.
You made a good point in really understanding your sales process, right? From hi, my name's David to yes, we have a PO and a closed deal. All of those stages in there. If you don't have it clearly articulated and understood, who's the competition, who are the decision makers, how much money do they have to spend, who gets to decide on how to spend money? If you don't have that clearly outlined and articulated, you're shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
If your sales folks aren't held accountable, I always had two different sets of salespeople. Put a metric ton in the front of the pipeline and then keep pushing deals out over time, or the ones who waited till the end of the quarter or the end of the month and then dumped everything in and said, okay, I got to ship these in 2 weeks. And the operations folks, the supply chain folks were always like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you jerking us back and forth? So one thing I always measured was the accuracy of your pipeline, not just deals closing, but also you said it would close on this date, or you said we'd move to the next stage on this date. And are we accurate in being able to control that and understand that?
Yeah.
I think you started to articulate, but I want to really emphasize having a very clear sales process and an understanding of what stages your customer is going to make you go through in order to make that decision.
Yeah, your stages are critical. No one ever puts enough time and thought into this, right? And and those stages even morph, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as your business changes, right? And so if you stay lackadaisical, right, then you start to fall back into something that's not going to be working. But I mean, it's one of the more common mistakes that I've seen over and over and over is the sales manager, sales director, whatever that might be, not taking the time to make sure that they're getting all the inputs, so the stages in the pipeline are correct, right? And then making sure you're walking through people, to your point, of decision makers and all of these things, right? So what moves it from stage A to stage B to stage C, right? Having some hard things that make that tangible and easier to understand. And then again, right? I always come back to this, right? You have to have other things that motivate people to do that correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
And most companies don't put that in place. So I'm going to build pipeline. I'll move stages because you said that I need to move this many from B to C. And, right. I can do any of that. Right.
Yeah.
But if I'm not bonused and measured on it properly, none of that matters.
That totally makes sense.
Very true.
Do you have any examples of like an incentivized structure that you've seen in the past to give incentives to building your sales process and following it accurately?
One thing that I've done in the past is compensate the sales folks on a gross margin number. Because if you get through a sale and we bought all this inventory, or we didn't buy inventory because you didn't forecast this sale, well, our cost is going to go up, so your opportunity to make more money is less, right? So if I sell things, if I can forecast in 3 months we're going to have this, that means the supply chain guys can go out and negotiate a better deal. If I say I'm closing it now and it needs to ship tomorrow, well, we're going to be paying through the nose to get that out. So my gross margin is going to change based on the accuracy of that forecast. So I've compensated on that. I don't like compensating as things move through the stages, even if they're accurate, because then it becomes about the stages and not the ultimate objective, which is I think you manage the process and you pay for the result. And the end result is we want to sell at a high margin. So that's kind of philosophically where I always landed. But you don't use a stick, you use a carrot. I always thought you recognize the people who are very accurate in their forecasting as it goes through the stages, and you recognize them and you acknowledge them and you maybe give them some small prizes or whatever. But at the end of the day, you pay them for the end result, which is, hey, you're a salesperson, your job is to sell things and make money for the company.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't been much different, right? I'd say it's about 80-20. 80% is based off your core result, but I've always had about 20% of that added pay, beyond base, be tied to MBO
Yeah.
Right. And things that help make these other processes
Because it makes you more money at the end
better,
of the day.
right? Yeah. But in the end, salespeople, your job is to close business.
Yeah.
Right. But if we're talking about manufacturing and we're talking about inventory, all this other stuff is pretty important because you can close stuff all day long. But to your point, if it's last minute, if it's low margin, right? There's all these things that have to be considered to make sure it's not every deal is a good deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? From a closing standpoint.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you said 20% is allocated to MBO, is that what you said? What does that stand for?
Managed by objectives.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
So the objective being accuracy in your pipeline.
Yeah.
Right.
All kinds, and it can be whatever you want, right? But I want accuracy at pipeline stages, right? And I'm only going to look at stages, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
Right. And these are the things, right? So did you get this information? Did you find a decision maker? Did you gather these core pieces of information? It's pretty easy when you have a CRM to track that stuff. If you've told the salespeople, listen, the only way you get paid on this is to be using the CRM and to be putting these things in.
We were joking about this earlier, but if you have a salesperson who says, "Well, I can't do my job unless I have a CRM," you need to go find a real salesperson. But for startups, there's sort of a tipping point where you need to move from Excel or Google Sheets into CRM. And I think you can extend the life of Excel for a pretty long time because some CRMs are pretty expensive. But that's your time to experiment and figure out what the hell are the stages of our sale.
Right, yeah.
How long do things typically sit inside of each stage of the bucket, or if you bring poop through the goose, or however you want to say it, whatever those stages are, how long is it typically taking? And then you can start, that way you'll be able to build your CRM better. But don't spend money on a CRM until you have a really good understanding of what your sales process should be, whether it's for federal sales or through channel or direct or whatever. You've got to clearly articulate those things.
Right. So the sales process is super tied to the inventory management side of the business because if they're not talking to each other, it's not going to be efficient.
We always invite our supply chain guys to the sales meetings so that because they also learn.
Right.
Well, if this salesperson calls me and says, "Dude, I've got this deal that's closing," are they full of crap or not?
Yeah.
Because that never happens, right? The sales guy goes, "Dude, I've got this opportunity coming," and you're like, "Yeah, right, whatever." But then there's also those salespeople. If they say it's going to close, you go, write that in gold.
Right, exactly.
So
then you can build your forecast from a supply chain standpoint.
yeah,
For that as well.
and it's also educational for the salespeople because the operations guys say, "Hey, here's what's going on with pricing. Here's what's going on with inventory. Here's what's going on." So that ongoing communication between those groups, rather than thinking about sales on an island and supply chain on an island, you think about it in a it's all one seamless process.